I went on a cruise, and something unspeakable came from the depths. There's a reason I call myself wallpaper, a reason I stay to the edges of things, rather than rushing to the center. If you've stuck with me from the beginning, you know that every vision I have is essentially like walking into a graveyard and stepping on the soil over the buried dead. It's only a fool who goes digging and tries to bring them back. Somewhere on the ship, the corpse of a drowned man shambled through the endless corridors of the lower decks. From the remarks that occasionally passed between the security officers, it was clear that this mysterious passenger X had not yet been located. What's more, the security staff did not realize that this passenger, a corpse they'd pulled from the sea in a rescue, was spreading a contagion. And they had locked up the only person who recognized the danger: me. Yep, that's right. I was in the brig. Which is often the sort of situation I find myself in when I leave my role as wallpaper and make the mistake of trying to interfere. Security staff caught me in restricted areas one too many times, confiscated my phone and flashlight, and confined me in the ship's jail, in a velvet dark so deep I might as well have been sealed in a tomb. I sat cross-legged in the pitch, palms cradled and thumbs touching, willing the seconds to pass. Nothing you do will change anything. I opened my eyes and could almost see the blackened sockets of my crispy corpse. A hallucination, I knew, induced by long hours in the dark. Crispy me whispered. The outbreak will happen. Even if you do find the passenger, it will just lead you right back here to me. I could almost smell my own burning flesh. When the lock finally clicked and a gruff man's voice spoke, I was so deep in desolation that I missed his words. What? I croaked. I said, you want to get out of here? Think you've been here long enough to learn your lesson? It took me a moment to realize he was holding the door open for me. I can't see. Maybe try opening your eyes, he wisecracked. I did. It made no difference. My eyes were seeing 6 days in the future, when the sea star would be in blackout and littered with the dead. May I have my phone? I said meekly. Rustling. It took me a moment to realize he was holding it out in my direction. I fumbled my hands in front of myself, managed to grab it. After so long in blackness, I was itching for even the faintest trace of light. I'd had the feeling there was something in the dark with me, sitting on the bench just next to me, and I'd been imagining it as my crispy corpse, but was anything really there? Or was the nauseating stench just the general stink of the ship? You shine that thing in my face, it's coming right back with me, he growled. Understood, sir, I mumbled. I swept the phone's feeble light through the cell behind me, noting a figure in the corner, slumped over just behind where I'd been sitting. The security chief. He was missing both eyes, and his mouth was split into a bloody grin over chewed bits of flesh he'd apparently bitten out of both arms, gnawing until he bled to death. Piano lounge. Evening, friend. Lily Tsuki called out to me as I slunk into a stool at the bar. In the slanted sunlight tipping through the windows, her purple hair gleamed almost magenta. She called with her usual levity, so they let you out. I ordered a drink and took a swallow, eyelids fluttering at the honeyed warmth. You heard about that, huh? Word is you've been going around harassing people all day long with a flashlight. You'd better watch it or they'll kick you off at the next port. We aren't making it to the next port, I muttered. Knocked back the rest of my drink. I was reaching for another when the musician took a seat next to me and ordered a drink of her own. To your 40th, she said, and clinked my glass. Want to tell me why you're trying so hard to waste that gift card I gave you? The man they rescued last night. I stared down into my drink. I saw him. Roaming the hallways. He's the source of the disaster in my visions. The nurses said he went missing. He's going to start a contagion of madness and death. The musician's eyes danced with merriment. You're pretty far out, you know that. But you can stop worrying. He's not missing. What do you mean? I mean they know exactly where he is. In the morgue. Dead. I knew it. I could tell just by looking at him. Already dead when they pulled him in. His body used as bait, as a host for whatever thing had come aboard when they rescued him. I shot up, exclaiming, I've got to get down there. Whoa, friend. She caught my sleeve. You want to be locked up again? You don't understand. He's going to kill us unless I can, I stammered, hearing how I sounded, and catching a glimpse of myself in the mirror behind the bar, a raving lunatic with a crow's nest of disheveled hair, bags under the bags in my eyes. Oh. Suddenly self-conscious, I patted my hair down. Look, Lily, I know I sound, that is. I know how I sound. But, there was nothing for it but to drink myself to oblivion. Boarding the ship had been a mistake. I couldn't prevent my own prophecies from coming to pass. But I persisted. But could I have your number? In case any of what I've foreseen comes true. Lily Tsuki's eyebrows crawled up to her hairline. I'd seen that look before enough to know when it was time to show myself out. I was about to leave when she took out her phone, asked for my number, and texted me. Hi. It's Hibiscus Crescent Moon. I stared at her message, stunned. She squeezed my shoulder and remarked, not too many death warnings, please. Actually, this whole thing you've got going kind of reminds me of a movie. Tell me if you get it. More passengers had filtered into the lounge, and Lily returned to her piano, and from behind the keys, called into the mic, this one's for the psychic lady in the crowd. Here's to you, friend. When she played the opening bars to Med World, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but oh, she had me pegged. I raised my glass. Hard to believe only 24 hours ago, I'd been so full of giddy delight as I arrived at the terminal. Already, it felt like a lifetime. And even though nothing I could do would save us all, for a brief moment, something flickered in my chest. Not hope, exactly, but one sweet moment to savor as I downed my drink and watched Lily Tsuki play against the backdrop of the ocean. A single, incandescent memory like a candle before it's snuffed into the darkness. Pool deck. After I left the bar, shrieks drew me up to the pool deck. Turned out to be a party, people throwing each other into the chlorinated water. Over at the patio, John's bloated corpse leaked fluids into a foul puddle. Everywhere the smell had intensified, the decay continuing. I noted that the teen boy who yesterday swam through his own corpse was now wearing the trunks he'd die in. I made preparations, nicking bottles from the bar. Would decapitation slow passenger X? Would burning his corpse? What I really wished for was a machete, but I only found steak knives that I snuck into my bag, and matches and rags. We'd see how the dead man would stand up to a Molotov. You know all this is hopeless, right? You've never lit a Molotov. Ignoring my inner voice of doom, I readied the alcohol in my cabin's bathroom, it being the only relatively small room to which I had access and could contain a corpse while I burned it. This could wind up being a very bad idea, of course, since I might end up using all these bottles I'd collected for my own barbecue. Sitting on my charred sofa, my own crispy corpse served a vivid reminder, a dead, smoky Cassandra illustrating the inescapability of my prophecies. Hope is the thing with feathers, I said like a mantra, and scribbled a note. I left it beside my corpse, tapped my blackened forehead and added, remember, fire and ice. God, I'd lost it. If I'd ever had it. I plugged in my phone and changed the batteries of my flashlight. The last hues of orange and red were fading to purple twilight. I dared not go below again searching for passenger X, and risk being detained. My best bet was to check in at the piano lounge at the end of Lily's shift, see if I could convince her to let me escort her to staff quarters on the lower decks. I could keep her safe while simultaneously searching for passenger X. But she'd be playing until after midnight. At that moment, a tremendous fatigue swept over me. I'd been operating on high adrenaline, anxious and terrified, and barely slept at all in the past 24 hours. My lids were suddenly horrifyingly heavy. My body was going to take rest whether I willed or no, I realized, so I returned to my lounger on the pool deck, set my alarm and closed my eyes, intending only for a short nap. I plunged into a deep and dreamless sleep. 6:17 a.m. I woke both well-rested and sensing that something was horribly, terribly wrong. My heart picked up pace when I understood why. The engines, they were silent. There was no wind gusting over me, tugging my hair and clothes and spoiling my rest. In the distant sky, pink lightened the horizon. Dawn. I'd slept through till dawn. Snatched my phone, but it was dead as a brick. No wonder it hadn't woken me. But the battery had been fully charged. Even as I registered this, my brain picked up on another sound. An announcement over the PA system, over and over. For safety reasons we request all passengers to remain in their cabins. The ship's firefighting team is fighting the fire. I repeat, for safety reasons, we request all passengers to remain in their cabins. Thick and dark against the dawn, a column of smoke rose from the stern. The Sea Star was dead in the water. With no engines, the cruise ship was now a floating death trap for everyone aboard and soon would be a vessel full of corpses. Snatching up my bag, I ascended to the jogging track for a better view. At this hour, there weren't many passengers on deck, and the few I spotted were retreating to their cabins. There was no sense of hurry or alarm, though I noted a few teen girls trying to video the smoke and exclaiming with dismay about their phones. They called out to a young man who joined their group, only to discover his phone was dead, too. All of them hurried below decks after a goateed crewman barked warning at them. Hey, you. The same crewman spotted me, waving me down. As I approached, his radio handset spat static. He's eating her face. He's eating her. Quickly, the crewman silenced it, tucking it into his pocket and snapping at me to go to my cabin, before charging inside and down the forward stairwell. That radio message, passenger X. Slipping my flashlight from my bag into my hand, I hurried after the goateed crewman, only to stop in the forward stairwell when the stench hit me like a tsunami, and I remembered the pile of rotting carcasses blocking the way down. The bodies were so deep into decomposition I could smell them leaking foul fluid. Even through my perfumed bandana, my lungs spasmed. But that radio message. I had to go through them. Holding my nose, I gripped the stairwell railing and barreled down the steps. They're not real, they're not real. My feet galloped along the carpet until my heel plunged into a squelchy mass and I stumbled, flashlight bouncing through the bodies as my vision of the future dissolved under my tumble. I thudded down the stairs and came to a jarring halt, the breath slammed out of me. Pushed myself up on the putrid-soaked carpet. Pain shot through my hip and shoulder, but nothing was broken. I thanked my brother for the falling practice in Aikido classes we'd taken, which I'd continued until around the same time I gave up the name Hope. Luckily, the reflexes persisted. But I'd lost track of the crewman. Picking my way through the dim, I was just about to turn back toward the stern when radio static crackled from the closed doors of the cabaret lounge. BBBZZZHHT. A little prickle sent the hairs on my neck standing on end. I didn't like that I could hear the radio, but no crewman. I crept to the doors and gripped the handle. BZZZHHT, CCCHHHT, BBBZTTT. Peeked my head in. Chairs. Stage. Bloated corpses. So where was the radio coming from? Had I imagined it? BBBBBZZZHHHT. There it was again. The room's acoustics made it difficult to pinpoint the sound, but it seemed to be down near the stage. I ducked inside the door, crouched low and inched to the equipment booth. From there, I had a good view down the aisle. Cast in dawn's rosy light through the wide windows, the theater was almost picturesque, were it not for the rotting corpses, their faces contorted in agony and an inexplicable dread that curdled in my belly because I still could not pinpoint that radio. Just the empty stage, the empty rows of chairs. BZZZZZT. It was definitely closer to the stage. I'd have to get nearer. The chairs at the front blocked my view. Every hair on end, every instinct shrieking, I crept down the aisle. My heart bounced in panicky flutters. I paused at the base of the stage and scanned the corpses. A leaky old man slumped on a table, mouth open in a groan, a few more bent over chairs, grinning, a couple of women in red dresses, one splotchy skinned near the stage, the other partially hidden under the curtains. And one corpse seated in an audience chair with his head thrown back, teeth bared in an agonized grimace through his goatee. I recognized him by his uniform. So that was how the goateed crewman would wind up. But no trace of his radio. PP please. The whisper was so faint I barely registered it. I leaned forward and there, behind his seated corpse, huddled in a fetal position below the chair, hands cupped to his ears and eyes squeezed over tears, was the living crewman. Rocking and bashing his head on the carpet. I started to rise, and the squeak of my shoes brought his head snapping up. His eyes fixed on me. P passengers return to cabins, he said through clenched teeth. P passengers return. Who did this to you? I asked. Was it the man they pulled from the ocean? What exactly did he? Passengers return, he burst again. His face spasmed, and suddenly his eyes rounded, wide in terror. It was an expression of such panic that I felt goosebumps rise up my arms, and I involuntarily stepped back as he stretched a hand out toward me. Then he said, BBB. BBBBZZZZHHHT. The radio. Deck 9. Need support on Deck 9. Passengers BZZZZHHH. It was behind me. Arms encircled my neck. I dropped automatically onto one knee, flipping my assailant forward over my shoulder. A snarling face and hissing, bloodied mouth flashed through my view, and the flutter of a red dress. One of the corpses, oh god. The corpse from beneath the curtains. F fuck. I cried, scrambling backwards. A corpse attacking me. How? How could a corpse be ZZZZZT? The radio. She had it in her hand. A corpse from 6 days in the future couldn't pick up a radio in the here and now. And the blood that dribbled from her lips as she leered at me, fresh blood, oh. Oh. You idiot, Cass. The woman had only been pretending to be dead, lying under the curtain until I'd turned my attention to the crewman. Her mouth widened in a grin, full of blood from chewing her own tongue and from attacking the crewman who was still on his knees, clutching his ear and whimpering. It hadn't been passenger X at all. The contagion was spreading among passengers now. I backed up, fumbling in my bag. The woman chucked the radio at me, and it struck the floor and broke apart behind me as I ducked. My fingers found the handle of a knife. The woman lunged. I flung a chair at her, which she knocked aside. Instinct seized control of my limbs as I slashed with the knife once, twice, cutting her swiping arms but only eliciting giggles, and then I lunged, ramming the blade deep up into her neck, under her chin. A horrible gurgling sound. The woman took a few staggering steps backward, clawing at the handle, and then collapsed, twitching in front of me on the carpet. She crawled toward the stage, finally dying in the spot her corpse from my visions currently occupied, 6 days into the future. That's why I'd seen 2 women in red dresses. The same women, before I stabbed her and after. Oh god, oh my god, I'd done a lot of things before, but never actually killed. Never been directly responsible for any of the corpses I'd come across. Her hot blood had spurted all over my hands and face. I'd tasted the salt and copper on my tongue. The horror hit me in a flood of nausea. Suddenly ill, I staggered away from her and heaved. Everywhere I touched left smears of red. Thud, thud, thud. Down by the stage, the crewman was hitting his head against the wooden floor. Through my numbness, a single thought penetrated Lilitsuki. If this was already happening here, how bad was it below? The crewman's head turned toward me as I grabbed my bag. The voices, he gasped. They're telling me to do things, the voices. His terrified eyes locked on mine. Run, he whispered. As I fled, my last glimpse was of him sobbing, huddled on the floor in a ball.